Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Daniela.
And I'm Julian. Together we are part of Group C2. And today we bring you an episode that we think will make you stop and think.
Today's topic is how equitable and inclusive are language policies in education? We will compare three very different contexts: Colombia, Uruguay, and the vast country in Spain.
And what makes this interesting is that even though these are geographically very different contexts, they all face a similar tension: the weight of English as a global language versus the need to protect local indigenous or minority languages.
So, if you are interested in linguistic justice, identity, and education, this episode is for you. Let's get started.
Let's start with the first case, Colombia. In recent years, the country has implemented a series of bilingualism policies that basically aim to get Colombians to learn English. The program's Colombia Bilingüe is the clearest example.
Yes, and the research made by Miranda and her collaborators from 2024, published in the journal ICALA, this offers a very interesting nationwide exploration of these policies in higher education. They found a strong tendency to prioritize English, but this is not always accompanied by reflection on what that means for the languages native to the territory.
Exactly. Colombia has more than 65 recognized indigenous languages, right? And yet, the official narrative remains learning English is the key to development and competitiveness.
Yes, that's what scholars call a neoliberal logic in language policy. Language is seen as an economic resource, not as a part of cultural identity or the rights of people.
And that creates enormous tension because, on one hand, there is the argument that English opens economic and professional doors, but on the other, there are communities that feel their languages are being displaced or made invisible within the educational system itself.
So, the critical questions would be: who benefits from that policy? Is it truly equitable if not all students have the same access to quality English language instruction? Because in many rural regions or in under-resourced public schools, the gap is enormous.
And that connects directly to the notion of equity, which does not mean giving the same thing to everyone, but recognizing differences and responding to them, something that Colombia language policy still has yet to address.
Now, let's move on to Uruguay. This is a fascinating case because the approach is quite different from Colombia's. An article by Ainscow and Viola from 2023 in the International Journal of Inclusive Education. They analyze how Uruguay has tried to build more inclusive and equitable educational systems.
And what did they find?
Well, they found that Uruguay has made important progress in terms of inclusion policies. Some examples: programs addressing diversity, curricular reforms aimed at reducing inequality, but they also identified some limitations because there is a gap between what the policy says on paper and what actually happens in classrooms.
What researchers call the gap between declared policy and actual practice And that is something seen in many countries in the region.
Exactly. In the case of language teaching, Uruguay has also had debates about English, but the country has a stronger tradition of defending public education as a space of equality. So there is a different tension. How to integrate the demands of the global world without losing that historical commitment to equity.
And what I find valuable in Ace, Cow, and Viola's analysis is that they do not only describe the problems, but also propose lessons. The importance of pedagogical leadership, teacher training, and community participation in educational decision making.
That's the case. There is no real inclusion policies if teachers are not prepared, or if communities don't have a voice in the process. Accountability must be shared.
Well said. And that brings us to the third case, the Basque country.
And this shows us the language policies are also power policies. Who decides which language is spoken, in which spaces, and with what resources? That reflects who holds power in a society.
The Basque country is a very particular example because there, the local language Basque or Euskera was banned for decades during the Franquist era, and yet today it is official language taught in schools, and there is an active linguistic revitalization policy in place.
So, the Basque case gives us an important lesson. It's possible to defend and revitalize a minority language if there is political will, resources, and community commitment. But it requires sustained effort over many years.
And in the context of foreign language teaching, the CAF research policy in 2021 and coordinated by Fabrega and other authors shows that in Latin America, language teaching policies are still heavily influenced by international agendas and multilateral organizations. There is external pressure that often does not account for local realities.
And well, we have reached the end. Today, we explored three very different contexts: Colombia, Uruguay, and the Basque country. And although each has its own history and its own challenges, there is something that repeats itself in all of them: the tension between global pressures and commitments to local identities.
And it requires recognizing that linguistic diversity is not an obstacle, it is a wealth.
One word: accountability. That means shared responsibility. This is fundamental because governments, educational institutions, teachers, and communities must all be part of these processes. Because a truly inclusive system cannot be built from top to down.
And the questions we are left with is, can education be truly equitable and inclusive if language policy do not recognize the diversity of learners? We believe the answer is no. Equity in education also means respecting the languages and cultures of all the students.
And if you have comments or want to explore this topic further, you can look up the articles we cite today. We will leave them in the episode description. Until next time, bye bye.
Thank you for listening. We hope this episode has invited you to reflect on something that concerns all of us: language, identity, and education. See you soon.